The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily represent those of any organization, including One Generation Away.
The freedom of a people to choose its leaders is the root of liberty.
Keep alive this experiment in liberty.
Liberty, in case you've forgotten, is the soul's right to breathe.
Government should be very minimal in protecting liberty.
Peace cannot be purchased at the cost of liberty.
The sturdy ground of liberty.
Liberty once lost is lost forever.
Fight for their liberty and for our security.
Guarantees individual liberty.
This great republic born alone in liberty.
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 Liberty. Liberty.
Just how much do you want liberty?
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner,
a production of LibertyNation.com.
Cutting through the double talk, taking on the topics, going after what the politicians really mean, and making it all clear. For your freedom and your liberty. Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Donald Trump, the left calls him white supremacist, neo-Nazi revivalist, the scourge of the nation. Is this all the left has got? Is this a winning strategy? Welcome back into Liberty Nation Radio, a production of LibertyNation.com and heard from coast to coast on the Radio America Network. President Trump condemns white supremacists in a nationally televised speech, but the left goes off on the president, saying he didn't mean it, and that he's the one responsible for the massacre in El Paso, as they mention nothing about the deranged leftist who went on a killing spree in Dayton. We'll talk it all out with Jeff Charles, race relations and media affairs correspondent for LibertyNation.com. Plus, we'll delve into Trump's so-called trade war with China with Liberty Nation economics correspondent Andrew Moran, and multiple threats to your liberty examined by constitutional lawyer and LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor Scott Cosenza.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
We commence the proceedings with our signature segment, Say What, where we roll out some of the most wacky, astonishing, damnable, and ultimately revealing statements uttered by politicians and the chattering class. And believe me, some of these statements fit in all four categories. We start a week marked by unprecedented, scurrilous accusations against President Trump, with the president's address to the nation after those massacres in El Paso and Dayton, one by a white supremacist, the other by a radical leftist. And he did what most presidents do after these kind of tragedies, tried to comfort the families and communities of the victims in a nationally televised address.
These barbaric slaughters are an assault upon our communities, an attack upon our nation, and a crime against all of humanity. We are outraged and sickened by this monstrous evil, the cruelty, the hatred, the malice, the bloodshed, and the terror. The shooter in El Paso posted a manifesto online consumed by racist hate. In one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy.
So Trump went on to visit both El Paso and Dayton, but even he could hardly have expected the widespread violent reaction on the left to his own condemnation of white supremacy. Start with the incredible shrinking presidential candidate Beto, don't call me Robert Francis O'Rourke, who took full advantage of one of those atrocities occurring in the district he used to represent to try and generate a viral moment for himself.
We have a president right now who traffics in this hatred, who incites this violence, who calls asylum seekers animals and an infestation. You may call a cockroach an infestation. You may use that word in the Third Reich to describe those who are undesirable, who must be put down because they are subhuman, with this beautiful country that decided 243 years ago that we would not define ourselves by race or ethnicity.
The Third Reich. He actually said that. There it is, the Nazi flag being raised by the left again. But did you hear the end? we will not be defined by race and ethnicity. When in fact, that's all Democrats seem to care about these days, race and ethnicity. But of course, frontrunner Joe Biden had to jump on the bandwagon as well.
The words of a president matters. They can encourage us to appeal to our better angels, to our better nature. But they can also unleash the deepest, darkest forces in this nation. And that's what I believe Donald Trump has chosen to do. He called a major American city, a disgusting, rat-infected rodent mess, as though the vibrant, diverse community around Baltimore somehow was less than human. He basked in the chants of "send her back," the shooter in El Paso declaring, quote, "This attack is a response to Hispanic invasion of Texas." It's both clear language and in code. This president has fanned the flames of white supremacy in this nation.
Well, so he couldn't even spit out his insults properly. You heard him talk about code. Well, the left was full of demented, paranoid takes on Donald Trump and his supposedly coded language. Listen to Malcolm Nance on MSNBC.
This country has had several of these mass incidents, but I think we're overdue for a real massacre of a political nature. These people feel that they are the foot soldiers and executors of what the disenfranchisement that the white race is feeling, and Donald Trump is giving them subliminal orders in their head.
Joe Biden code, Malcolm Nance, subliminal orders from the president. But you ain't heard nothing yet. On MSNBC, an actual mainstream media channel on cable TV, former FBI official Frank Figliuzzi imagined a thoroughly paranoid conspiracy theory.
The president said that we will fly our flags at half-mast until August 8th. That's 8-8. The numbers 8-8 are very significant in neo-Nazi and white supremacy movement. Why? Because the letter H is the 8th letter of the alphabet, and to them, the numbers 8-8 together stand for Heil Hitler. So we're going to be raising the flag back up at dusk on 8-8.
I don't even know what to say. But if you ever needed proof that the left has become dangerously unstable, there you have it. But this is what the left is saying. How about what they're doing? Well, Congressman Joaquin Castro of Texas, brother of presidential candidate and former HUD Secretary for Obama, Julian Castro, decided to send out a tweet with the list of names and businesses of several Trump supporters in his own district, the district he represents. It's called doxing. And it led to even Willie Geist of hard left MSNBC questioning Castro's tactics.
But, Congressman, as you look at this list, I know you said you didn't put their addresses out there. It's easy to find them. These people undoubtedly are already being harassed online or perhaps face-to-face in some cases. What do you say to those people this morning who said, I made a campaign donation and now I'm going to be harassed? I'm going to have people protesting outside my business or perhaps even my home. Do you want them to repent for their support for Donald Trump, or what do you want from them?
Well, the first thing is that I don't want anybody harassed or targeted.
But they will be because you put their names in public.
Like that was not my intention.
But that's what will happen.
These things are public. No, what I would like for them to do is think twice about supporting a guy who is fueling hate in this country.
Right. So a member of the United States Congress is openly intimidating his political opponents by publicly shaming their entirely legitimate political contributions. This is what it's come to, as the left defies the notion that they had already reached rock bottom. But wait, that's not all. The New York Times, the gray leftist lady, ran a headline about Trump's nationally televised speech. Trump urges unity versus racism, but the left, in the person of vacuous presidential candidates like Beto O'Rourke and The most vacuous of them all, Kirsten Gillibrand, immediately blasted the Times. So the former paper of record decided to relent and switch the headline to Assailing Hate But Not Guns. So it switched from Trump urges unity versus racism, and then after they were beaten down, it became Assailing Hate But Not Guns. And Donald Trump Jr. went on Fox News to say he was hardly surprised.
They put up actually what happened, an objective headline, and then they were hit by the mob. And the mob went after them, and they caved to that pressure. They caved to the Twitter mob and gave their viewers what they wanted as opposed to the actual news. And that's a scary place to be. The New York Times doesn't function as a news organization anymore. They function as the marketing wing of the Democrat Party. So does the Washington Post and, frankly, most of the mainstream media. And that's what it is. It's not about reporting what actually happens. It's not about being objective in that. It's about driving forward a political agenda, in their case, obviously a very leftist political agenda. And it's sick because there is no amount of effort, no amount of statement that my father could give that would ever satisfy them.
Indeed, nothing President Trump ever says or does will be enough for the left, but now that they've failed repeatedly to take him down with Russiagate and all the rest, the only choice they'll be left with is to beat him at the ballot box, and the only chance they have to do that is with scurrilous ad hominem attacks, repeatedly calling him a racist and white supremacist, but in the process unmasking their own utter desperation and the fact that they cannot beat Donald Trump on the issues. Quick break, and then we're back to talk some more about the issue of race and whether it's gotten so bad that we're looking at a cold civil war.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Where can you find honest political commentary with sobering analysis, accountability, deconstructing threats to our liberty, and boldly reporting the truth? Subscribe to the LibertyNation.com YouTube channel, where facts matter.
We believe that all men are entitled to the blessings of liberty.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Democrats openly call President Trump a white supremacist. Joe Biden says he's taking America to a dark place. MSNBC trots out a guy who says Trump is sending secret dog whistles to his neo-Nazi followers with the 8-8 thing we played you earlier. A congressman doxes Trump donors, sending the names out on Twitter of his own constituents in San Antonio, Texas. Joining us to try and make some sense of all this is Jeff Charles, race relations and media affairs correspondent for LibertyNation.com. Hello, Jeff.
Hey, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining us. Can you make any sense of all of this other than believing that the Democrats are having a psychotic break?
Well, they're using the same playbook that they've used against every Republican president. And the thing is, I won't say that Trump has always handled racial issues the right way. At the same time, I don't believe that he hates minorities. But realistically, this is what the progressives do. They do it against anybody who disagrees with them. So even if he were a virulent racist, nobody would believe the left because they say this stuff about everybody. And all this stuff just contributes to the toxic climate that we have right now in American politics.
Now, the president went on national TV and denounced white supremacy explicitly. But, of course, you know, that's not enough for the left. What more could he have done than to tell a nationally televised audience that white supremacy is despicable?
Nothing. But that's the thing. We're assuming that they actually care whether he denounces white supremacy or not.
Right.
It wouldn't matter what he did. He could have been perfect on race, and they still would have levied these accusations against him because that's what they do. They're not really trying to fight racism here, at least not the chattering class. They're not trying to fight racism. They're just trying to score cheap political points.
I think the word racism has been used, it seems, dozens of times a day by the left ever since Donald Trump took office 2.5 years ago, and it's absolutely lost its sting. So is what they're doing now figuring that people don't even respond to the racism thing anymore? Maybe they'll respond if they call him a white supremacist, which is one step beyond being a racist.
Yeah, actually, I think that's why they pivoted to that term, because first it was just racist, then they went with white nationalists, and now they're just going full-blown white supremacist. I think that they are trying to change the words that they're using because they think it'll elicit the same effect. But the problem is that they've used the word racist for so frivolously that it doesn't matter what they change it to. I mean, what are they going to do after white supremacist doesn't work? What else can they possibly come up with? Nazi? I don't know.
We are with Jeff Charles, race relations and media affairs correspondent for LibertyNation.com. Now, I thought I'd seen it all, but I've said this so many times, Jeff, I thought I'd seen it all, and then they do something, the left, even more outrageous that you could not really even envision. This week, the guy on MSNBC, a former FBI official, as a matter of fact, an assistant director of a division of the FBI, goes on MSNBC and says that Trump is raising the flag on August 8th because 8-8 is the eighth letter of the alphabet, so it's Heil Hitler, and he's raising the flag again after putting it at half-mast for the victims of El Paso and Dayton. Going to put it back up at full mast on August 8th. Essentially, he's saying he's rising a tribute to the Nazis on August 8th. I mean, I don't even know how to process that. Do you?
No, not at all. Honestly, this is just them trying to pull at straws. Like they're trying anything that they possibly can. So Trump has driven them so crazy that basically they're trying these ridiculous conspiracy theories, which people on the right peddle in conspiracy theories too, but the mainstream media in the past usually hasn't. So they're just trying to throw whatever they can at them and hoping that it sticks, but it hasn't worked and it's not going to.
So that leads to my last question for you, Jeff. Can we any longer deny the reality that this country is right now in the midst of a cold civil war, not north-south, but left-right?
No, we can't deny it anymore. It's been going on for a while, and I don't really see an end to it anytime soon. Like I said, I'm not sure if this will end until people get hurt. I mean, and it's a scary thought. Nobody wants to see that happen, but you do have people on both the left and the right.
Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Jeff Charles, race relations and media affairs correspondent for LibertyNation.com. You can read his stuff, and it's really good. Quick break, and then we are back to discuss Trump and China.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Exhausted by all the fake news? On LibertyNation.com's YouTube channel, facts and fresh, bold analysis are what you get without the leftist spin. Subscribe today to the LibertyNation.com YouTube channel because
truth
is making a comeback.
Far more important than my political future and far more important than yours, the well-being of our country.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Well, President Donald Trump has been accused of playing grand 4D chess lately. You have to wonder if the billionaire real estate mogul is not only competing in a chess match against the world, but also playing backgammon, checkers, Risk, and hungry hippos blindfolded, arms tied behind his back, and underwater without an oxygen tank. Not my words, but the words of Andrew Moran, economics correspondent for LibertyNation.com. And Andrew joins us now to discuss the president's escalating efforts for a trade deal with China and the condition of the nation's and the world's economy. Hello, Andrew.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I appreciate it as always. So what is the case for Trump playing 4D chess, so-called, with China, as opposed to the opposing view that he doesn't know what the hell he's doing in igniting a trade war that will damage the economy in the run-up to his own election campaign?
Well, mind you, this is just a hypothesis because nobody knows what's going on in President Trump's mind. My theory goes like this, and all our viewers, please bear with me because it could be as confusing as the plot to Raymond Chandler's The Big Sleep. So he's demanding lower interest rates to funnel cheap money into the economy. Then this would boost growth for another few months. Now he's demanding 3 more rate cuts, which should be good until at least the next election. A day later, he shocks markets by slapping new tariffs on the rest of the, I think, $300 billion in Chinese goods. He says that's because China's not buying enough agriculture and it's not stopping the flow of fentanyl into the United States. This sends the yuan completely spiraling out of control. It gives him the ammunition to say, hey, China is a currency manipulator, and so Fed, look out. You know, you have to now lower the dollar too. He even admitted this in a recent tweet that he doesn't like a strong dollar. So what does the central bank do? It cuts rates, again, weakening the buck. So perhaps this is why he shifted his opinion from loathing low interest rates during the campaign to suddenly becoming an advocate for them. But, who knows? This is, from what we've seen since Trump became president, it's interdimensional chess in addition to playing a few rounds of gin rummy and backgammon and charades, all blindfolded, mind you, all blindfolded.
Well, the road is littered with people that have underestimated Donald Trump, that's for sure. But now, just how big a difference in our economy would the deal with China that Trump's seeking make in the U.S. economy? And do you see such a deal happening before the 2020 election?
Well, I'm not sure how to answer that because I think it's unclear what kind of deal the administration is seeking. The terms have changed so much since the trade war started. It went from, trying to stop the dumping of steel and aluminum, and then it went to fighting IP theft, and then it went to China buying more agriculture. And same with China. I'm not sure what China expects out of this, except maybe something to do with Huawei, its chief telecommunications company. But when it comes to the agricultural front, which I've written extensively about at Liberty Nation, it's a big deal. It's a big thing that led to this escalation. If you look at the data from the General Customs Administration in China and then the United States' Bureau of Economic Analysis, you see actually that Beijing purchased record amounts of agriculture, particularly soybean, before the whole trade spat started. It's only been in the last year that imports have dropped. Plus, one of the reasons why China may have not purchased soybeans as much as it said is because the country is going through a massive African swine flu. It's the farmers are slaughtering their pigs and their hogs to stop it from expanding. So this also leads to less demand for soy feed. So in the end, do I think Trump is going to strike a trade deal? It seems like he's delaying it until a few weeks before the election, which of course would be huge because it would lead to massive gains in financial markets. Again, this is all part of the 4D chess strategy.
Our guest here on Liberty Nation Radio is Andrew Moran, Chief Economics Correspondent for LibertyNation.com. So, Andrew, the U.S. is a democracy or constitutional republic, and China most certainly is not. To what extent can Xi Jinping wait out Trump, knowing he doesn't have to face voters the way that Trump does in this democracy? And could he afford, Xi Jinping, to hold out stubbornly for 5 more years and a second Trump term as opposed to 1 more year?
That is a fascinating question, and I've read actually a few viewpoints on this matter. The one main idea that I agree with is that perhaps Xi Jinping is also biding his time until the United States election to see if a Democratic candidate wins. Because if a Democrat wins, whether it's Kamala Harris or, of course, Joe Biden and his relationship with China, it would make it easier for Beijing to negotiate better terms for its country. My only dispute with that, however, is that any further economic contraction might destabilize the political structure, like you're seeing in Hong Kong with all the unrest occurring. Then also there's another issue that I have trouble with, is that if you accept Jinping's that can deal with an economic collapse, then the one thing that he could do is say that, well, you know what, why doesn't China just sell its holding of U.S. treasuries? China holds about, $1.5 trillion of the United States debt. If he sold it off and dumped all that into the bond market, that would have a huge damaging effect on the United States economy and the government than just postponing a trade deal.
So let's talk about the world economy a bit here. Andrew, the U.S. is growing at a much higher rate with much lower unemployment than most all of the developed world. What effect does our economy have on the rest of the world, and what effect does the world economy have on the U.S.?
Well, I think what has helped the United States economy, as well as the global economic structure, and what's made everyone wealthy in the last 30 years is international commerce, foreign trade. The United States imports and exports with a whole host of countries all over the world. Businesses have such vast supply chains in today's marketplace, which is why the trade deal is concerning for free market fetishists like myself, as Joe Schaefer, our national correspondent, told me. If you remember Milton Friedman's I-Pencil essay and video, he highlights various components of something as simple as the pencil. Graphite from South America, rubber from Malaya, and all the thousands of people who've manufactured a single pencil. So I think it really is a two-way street that, the United States needs the rest of the world, and the rest of the world needs the United States. You just look at steel as an example of this in the modern U.S. economy. As we discussed in one of our previous interviews, the price of domestic steel collapsed in the last year because the demand from steel-consuming industries fell. Now, these businesses relied on cheap steel for so many years, helping them make everything from aerospace technology to automobiles. But in the end, though, I think the United States has the upper hand because it has all the capital, both human and financial capital. The most recent data show that the rest of the world is also bullish on the United States economy because capital inflows have actually increased in the age of Trump, which I found fascinating because if you looked at all the years before Trump, capital inflows have fluctuated up and down. But if you see under Trump's tenure, the capital inflows have gradually increased. I think it was near the start of Trump's administration when he got that massive deal with that Japanese firm. I think it was a SoftBank. So, the United States economy always has the upper hand in the rest of the world, but it's a two-way street.
Now, Andrew, I know you're not a fan of the Federal Reserve, but they do set interest rates, and they recently dropped the interest rate by a 1/4 point, but the market was apparently expecting 1/2 point and reacted unfavorably. Did Chairman Jerome Powell and the Fed do the right thing or not?
Well, I think it was abnormal for a central bank to raise interest rates in the boom phase of the business cycle. If you've read my writing at least once, I'm a firm believer in allowing the market to decide interest rates. So I can't really answer if Powell did the right thing or not because the market can dictate that, not some a writer from LibertyNation.com. But I would say that it is further evidence, and I've written a lot about this also, that the Fed is not an independent institution. The central bank will take its marching orders from the White House. But as you can tell from the FMOC meetings and Jerome Powell's talks with the press, they still try to show a modicum of integrity and independence. But the Fed's lack of independence is not just Trump. If you look throughout the history of the Federal Reserve, all of the administrations have partnered with the Fed in some way or another. Mariner Eccles, he was an admirer of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he actually petitioned the White House to help him somehow achieve the New Deal and get the United States out of the Depression. William Martin with JFK, Arthur Burns with Richard Nixon, and I believe also Gerald Ford, and then Alan Greenspan with Bill Clinton. So the Fed and the White House, they have such a strong partnership. So I get really irked when everyone complains about, Trump is threatening the integrity of the Fed when the Fed never had any integrity in the first place.
Okay, on that sour note, we thank you, Andrew, for joining us. Keep up your good work.
Thank you very much.
Andrew Moran, economics correspondent for LibertyNation.com. Quick break, and then we're back talking liberty.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
And now we welcome you to the portion of Liberty Nation Radio, which we entitled Talkin' Liberty, as we welcome in our regular contributor, constitutional lawyer, LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor, podcast director. God, it's too many titles. I can't even keep up with them all.
It's very good to hear them all in a row like that.
Ladies and gentlemen, Scott D. Cosenza.
It's a nice ego boost. Thank you, Tim. It's my favorite portion of the radio program, I'll tell you that.
Yes, you've said that repeatedly, on and off the air. Now, we talked about it earlier in the program, but mostly from a political standpoint. The unbelievable spectacle of a member of the U.S. House of Representatives doxing donors to Donald Trump, donors in his own district, people that he's supposed to be representing, and instead he's trying to publicly shame them.
It's Joaquin Castro, who we're talking about, Democrat from Texas, and we have this law that requires political donors to federal campaigns to be revealed so that we can see if who's buying the representation.
Right.
Not so that the real power brokers, the representatives themselves, can use that as a stick to beat people with. And that's what we have here. And this is, I think, one of the things that we always have to remember when people say that political contributions should be immediately disclosed. We have the technology. Well, here's one of the reasons why you don't want them to be disclosed. There was a situation, Tim, where the famous sheriff from Maricopa County, Arizona, Joe Arpaio, was using campaign records to target his political enemies as well. It's all a great reason why we should just let people donate anonymously and let the speech itself sort itself out. But I think that, to say that I'm outraged, to say that I'm speechless, I'm gobsmacked that a sitting member of Congress would, what does he expect to have happen to these people? If not violence, then what?
Well, we're in a climate, Scott, where a guy can go on a major network like MSNBC and declare that Donald Trump was sending out secret neo-Nazi signals for August 8th hoisting the flag to his neo-Nazi followers. Scott, I think these people have gone completely off the deep end. I said this to Jeff Charles earlier in the show. I think they've had a psychotic break.
Almost surely I will give a wrong diagnosis if I wander into actual professional medical diagnosis.
True
so
enough.
I'll leave that aside. I will say, though, that it's one thing to say unhinged things about Donald Trump, even if they're lies. Maybe that's just par for the course in American politics. But it's another thing to put out information that it seems to, I think, the non-engaged reader, right, the person who's not on a team necessarily, that this is some kind of a marching order against these people issued by their congressman to go ahead because of their political speech and do something to those people. Is it something legal?
No wonder
you get the sense from Mr. Castro's statements that he'd be comfortable with lots of bad things happening to those people.
Well, no wonder Joaquin Castro and his brother Julian are such fans of Venezuela.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that goes on there. Now, Donald Trump and Lindsey Graham, in responding to these twin tragedies in El Paso by a white supremacist, in Dayton by a deranged leftist, and it's important to point that out because it's all been El Paso all the time, white supremacy all the time. The guy that perpetrated the attack in Dayton was a crazed leftist and a big fan of Elizabeth Warren. But you don't hear people saying much about that. But in response to this tragedy, Donald Trump and Lindsey Graham over in the Senate are, in your words, caving to gun grabbers. How?
Well, they've expressed open support now for red flag laws, the legislation that we haven't actually seen the legislation, Tim. I wrote a piece on this for LibertyNation.com this week. There was an announcement about legislation that's going to be offered. So that's what we have to go on. That Graham says that he's moving forward with it, with Trump support, that will basically give money to states for helping them enact these red flag laws. What the laws essentially do is they remove due process rights from Americans when it comes to retaining their Second Amendment rights. It's as simple as that. Right now, all the rights that you and I have as free persons who aren't convicted of any crime, in order for the state to take away those rights, they have to use a due process to do so, where we're represented by counsel, we have a chance to fight for them, criminal proceeding or a civil commitment proceeding. That's not what happens with these red flag laws. They remove the due process. So I could, for instance, go to court and say, Tim Donner's a crazy man, and he has issued all kinds of threats, and he needs to have his guns taken away. And in a typical state, there are these are state laws, and they do differ from state to state. But in a typical state's red flag laws, if I made a compelling case to a judge without even notifying you before the hearing, they could say, yes, we're going to do this. You're now relieved of your firearms by right. You can't touch or buy one.
I think that the thing that is most frightening about this is the way that it could be abused for political purposes. It will be. All right, let's just say it. It will be used as a cudgel against political enemies. And I think that's the problem.
And familial ones. And from my perspective as an attorney, Tim, it's in the family law courts where we're going to see most of these, where women, and because mostly between men and women, men are firearms enthusiasts more than women are, women will use this as a weapon against men in custody and support proceedings. And that, I'm sure there will be some actual genuine uses of this law. And to the extent that that stops a mass shooting, that's good. But it's not okay to do so at the expense of our precious rights.
I think it's a shame that we've come to a point in the process where we have to, where we can say, as we just did, that there's a certainty that a law like this intended for good is going to be abused. And that's the problem with all government programs. If only the people that qualify for aid to families with dependent children and other welfare programs, only the people that really needed them, the people that really couldn't help themselves, were using it. Right. If it was only them, we wouldn't object to the program.
It's the opposite that's true, which is that we have later on down in our list, if we get a chance to get to it, the story about the FBI Officers Association basically arguing for the passage of a new domestic terrorism bill. Well, we had a new domestic federal criminal bill passed after September 11th, and over 80% of the warrants that are issued under those special warrants that we needed for terrorism are for drugs. We know already. In other words, it's not that down the line the abuse is going to happen, or maybe there'll be waste, fraud, and abuse. The majority of it's going to be waste, fraud, and abuse. And the majority of these red flag laws, I think it's fair to say, will not be used to stop any kind of mass shooter, but instead frustrate the rights of ordinary Americans.
Who gets to really define what a domestic terrorist is? Who creates that definition?
It's just quite silly. It's a power grab. In the face of crisis, it's a great time to grab power. If you will benefit from gaining power, now is a great time to grasp for it, because people are more willing to give away their liberty in the threat of this uncertainty than they normally would be.
All right, the Wisconsin governor has been sued for violating the First Amendment rights and blacklisting the right-wing press.
Yes, Tim, this is about the John J. MacIver Institute for Public Policy. It's basically a free market Wisconsin public policy organization that does journalism as well. And they can't get on the lists for the announcements, for the meetings, for when they are. And when they find out about them secondhand or thirdhand, as they did in this case, they couldn't get in the door because they weren't on an RSVP list.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Tim.
This program, Liberty Nation Radio and LibertyNation.com's own podcasts, The Uprising, hosted by Scott, with occasional appearances from yours truly. Well, maybe more than occasional. Plus, The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, where past is prologue, with Mark Angelides. All of them available on demand at LibertyNation.com and from fine podcast providers everywhere. So that is it for this week. But we'll be back at you next week, same time, same station. Till then, this is Tim Donner saying stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.